Hi, this is Charles Kelly. How you doing? I'm sitting here in London at 32 degrees, but you're not here to hear a weather report, are you? But it is hot here, 32 degrees. Now, the question I'm asking you today is why are house prices rising again in the UK? Now, I say this because people think, well, house prices always rise in the UK. They always go up every year. But of course, if you've been around a few years, you know that that's not true. They do go down at some in state, and I've lived through many property recessions. And look at the situation at the moment. We've got this virus that still hasn't been sorted out. We've got unemployment soaring, and 11 million people on job retention furlough, which means they're sitting at home doing nothing, and the companies are supporting their staff through government help. It's almost like the company is kind of on benefits, on the dole. And then we've got millions of self-employed people applying for various sort of benefits, and we've got situations going on that's never happened before. The economy is still partly in lockdown, and will not even come out of lockdown until July. We've also got unemployment reaching record levels, that have not been really seen since the recessions of the 80s. And companies, I'm seeing a lot more companies either go out of business or lay staff off. So, with this, it seems against all the odds that property prices and demand for property should be rising in the UK. However, this is actually happening. According to the online property platform Zoopla, the number of agreed home sales is up 4% compared to the pre-lockdown levels in early March. Now, Zoopla is a company where you can advertise properties online. All the agents use them, so they can monitor figures of agreed sales, when it goes on the market, how long it's on the market for, and so on. And you can look this up if you're searching for properties, just as you can with Rightmove. However, house prices rose by 2.4% in May, and buyer demand across the whole of the UK is actually 46% higher than it was in March. But at that time, demand had fallen by 70%. So you've got to put this against the backdrop of a massive drop in March and April when the market was, on the ground. Agents were closed. A lot of people couldn't complete on sales, on purchases and sales. They couldn't move. We're all in lockdown. So could this be that this is just a reaction to the pent-up demand that there was in earlier on in the year? Or could it be for other reasons? Could it just be we're comparing a real rock bottom situation with a small rise now? However, it is good news, and you've got to look at also where it is, where these house prices are rising the fastest and where they're not rising. And in fact, where they're rising the fastest is in the cities up north: Leeds, Manchester, Leicester, which is not quite up north, but it's north of Luton, north of Watford, as they say. And prices are not rising in places like Oxford, Aberdeen, and parts of London, but they are on the move, and demand is going up. So that's a bit of good news. I don't know whether this is coming from buy-to-let investors, from foreign investors looking to put their money into the UK, or maybe investors snapping up bargains. I know that even during the lockdown, properties were sold through auctions. They were sold through online auctions, and people were agreeing to buy properties from abroad on the phone and just looking at some photos and just looking at some videos online, and they were buying them. Chinese buyers were buying stuff in the north of England, where, let's face it, property prices are a lot lower. You can still pick up properties in some parts of Wales, for instance, and some parts of the north, for £30,000-40,000, whereas that wouldn't buy you a garage in London, where you're probably looking at, even around the M25 area of London, on the outskirts, the average 3-bed house, 500,000 or of that level. And so prices in the north have, they're not caught up, but they're on the move. Nottingham is another hot spot. Prices up by about 4% there. So this is all good news. And I know there's a lot of investors. I know personally a lot of investors who invest in those sort of areas around Nottingham, the Midlands, and further north, as well as parts of South Wales and Manchester. So that's good news. Buyer demand, as I said, is 46% higher than it was in March, and Zoopla can monitor that. The official figures will be the land registry figures when property sales are actually registered. So we'll look at that in a few months' time and see what the land registry figures are. But Zoopla can keep an eye on the sales activity in the meantime. However, my solicitor, who is in London, said things are still very quiet. Maybe in some parts of the country things are buzzing, but certainly not around where he operates in North London and Hertfordshire. Now, look, what you've got to remember is property is a long-term investment, and over the longer term, property usually bounces back, apart from some spots in the world where they don't. But over the long term in the UK, property bounces back from recessions, depressions, and even wars. Property does always come back. And one reason is the simple economics of supply and demand, which we did in school. When supply is low, demand is high, prices will go up. And this is probably what's been happening over the last few years, because the UK is a small country. The size of the UK, you can fit into Texas many times over. You can fit into many American states. Just fit them in there. That's the size of this island, the British Isles, and yet there's well over 60 million people here. The population is growing, living longer, and we're still the 7th largest economy in the world. Which it's still a good place to do business. It's still a thriving economy, albeit down at the moment and under a great burden of debt and problems. But it shows you the strength of us, that we can support businesses throughout this. And even with the government printing 300 billion, we can still keep the balls in the air, keep the economy afloat. So this is why I think a lot of investors are still interested in investing in property long term. There was always a shortage of property. There still is a shortage of property. They say that they're going to need to build 200,000 homes a year just to keep up with ongoing demand for property. And what we do need is more cities. We need more towns. We need more imagination with the building. Otherwise, prices will still keep going up. And the government have encouraged building. They've allowed offices to be converted into residential, which was always very difficult before, and pubs and that sort of thing. And these buildings being converted into residential. So that has boosted the property market. And the property market is very important to the UK economy because it employs hundreds of thousands of people, not just builders, but indirectly through agents, solicitors, lawyers, surveyors, and all sorts of things, painters and decorators afterwards. All these things are supported by the housing market. So yeah, it seems like a surprising thing to see property prices up in this market, but in many ways it's not a surprise, because I think we're seeing demand, pent up demand from just before the lockdown and that period. And also the stock market has gone up to what it was almost towards the end of last year. So it looks like things are bouncing back. However, I'm still cautious. I'm still not rushing out doing anything just yet. I would be looking for a very good deal before I'd invest at the moment. And that's why you've really got to take professional advice, maybe do some professional training if you're interested in becoming a property investor. And in fact, there's a few webinars going on this week. There's actually a whole series of property webinars and seminars going on this week. And one in particular is a host of expert speakers. Every night they've got a different subject. And speakers like Mark Homer, Kevin McDonald, both of these people I've met, they're good guys. Mark Homer jointly owns or controls nearly 700 properties, and they're doing enormous deals at the moment. Kevin McDonald, a few years ago he was broken in debt. Now he's a multi-millionaire, and he's done a lot of this through buying and acquiring properties using none of his own money, but using techniques that mean that you can buy properties using other people's money, using strategies that do not involve you even buying the property, but do involve you controlling the property. So these are good guys, and there's a seminar. It's on. One of them is on tonight, and they'll teach you how to look at the post-pandemic landscape of property investment, how things have changed, how to make your money stretch as far as possible when building a portfolio. Many people run out of money after buying one or two properties. They put all their money into deposits, all their money into paying all this stamp duty, and they say, "Oh, I haven't got any more money," and it's too early to sort of remortgage out to get the money out again but using the right strategies, getting the right deals at the time. The deal is made at the time, not later on. But using the right strategies, you definitely can, you know, buy properties which you can then improve and then refinance out to get your money out to move on to the next deal. But you can also make money from property without even buying it and without even using your own money and without even having to put down a deposit or, you know, pay all this stamp duty. There are lots of strategies. So basically what they're saying is, yeah, it's a good time. Property, you know, over the long term, it's always a good time to invest in property, but I would look cautiously and look at the right ways to invest in properties, the right way to make money from property, rather than just going out and saying, right, there's a property come on the market, I'll go and buy it and pay the asking price. There's very fast ways of getting cash flow from properties, which you can learn on the seminar. And you can, if you've got a portfolio yourself, a small portfolio, learn how to unlock the potential of that. Maybe make more money just from your existing property. Could you change things around to actually squeeze more profit out of your existing property? And you can also learn how to fund commercial deals and build a commercial power team as well. Commercial is the next level from buy to let. It's, you know, commercial conversions, moving up a step. But I think you've got to cut your teeth on the simple stuff before you move on to, you know, walk before you learn to run, as it were. So have a look at that. In the long term, I'm confident of the UK property market, but I'm still cautious at the moment because we could see another wave of this virus. We could see a long-term downturn. We could see a long-term recession. But in recession and even in depressions, some people still make money. They make money in good times and bad times because they're using the right strategies. They're learning things. They're adapting to the market changes. And, you know, they're like the Darwinian thing. They're adapting. The species that can adapt and adapt to their new situations are the ones that survive, not necessarily the strongest. People who just buy a property and sit on it and do the same thing year after year, you know, they might struggle because things are changing. So have a look at that, and you know, and I'll be there tonight. So I'll be joining you there tonight, watching those things, because I can always learn from things. Even though I've been in property for, you know, 30 odd years, I've seen many people come from nowhere behind me with no money and race ahead, and they're really killing it in the market when I'm just coasting along. But anyway, have a look at that seminar. And as I said, property prices are on the rise against all the odds, against whatever's going on in the economy. Property prices somehow are still rising and demand is rising. But be cautious. Don't rush out and jump into it just yet. You know, make sure you've got the right training, which is what the seminar tonight is all about. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll speak to you again soon. It's a baking hot day today. It's 32 degrees. It's almost, you feel like you're in southern Spain or something when you go out. It's whoa, you know. But I'm waiting for it to cool down a bit, and I'll go out for a walk. So hi to Darren, great to see you. Ronnie there, Jins, and Vi and Ty, great to see you all. I have people watching this Facebook Live from all over the world, and it really is fun to see. It's probably a bit late in Asia at the moment, but I get a lot of people tuning in from Asia, and believe me, the UK in the long run is still a great place to invest. And, you know, bear in mind, you have a good rule of law here, you have an order and a way of doing things, you have an established marketplace. You know, I've seen in countries like the Philippines where, you know, they're building, you know, thousands and thousands of condos and properties, but you know, there isn't really an established market like you've got here. You can't just go on to Zoopla and Rightmove and say, well, that property there sold for this price, and therefore what I'm buying is a good deal. You're really just buying new properties all the time, and you know, when they finish that development, they move all their attention to the next development and try and sell those. The resale market is difficult there, whereas here, you know, you've got a proper marketplace, like a stock market. You know, you buy stocks and you can sell stocks on that market. Here, you can nearly always find a buyer. You can, you know, worst comes to worst, you go to an auction and a property will sell for the right price. There is an established market. Everywhere you go in the UK, you've got estate agents, you've got solicitors, you've got lenders who can lend. And that's another important thing. The money supply here means that you can borrow money to buy property, which you can't do with shares. And in many countries, it's very difficult to get mortgages. Here, you can get mortgages. You can get mortgages at very cheap rates. You know, you can have long-term fixed rates that a few years ago I'd have only dreamed of having those sort of fixed rates at 2 and 3%. I was nearly paying that a month on my first mortgage. I was paying 16.25%, and from the time I agreed to buy this property in 6 months, the rates went up from 12, just over 12% to 16.25%. The rates just leapt up. My payments nearly doubled. It was killing me. But when I sold that property, I made £10,000 in a few years, and I was living there. I did nothing to it. I just moved in, painted it a bit, lived there, and that was it. And when I sold it, it was £10,000 more. But at the time, I thought, oh my God, this is killing me. I haven't got any money. All my money was going on the mortgage payments, but it worked out okay. And ever since then, every time I've moved, I've made a bit of money on property. I've bought buy-to-let stuff. I've done commercials as well. And, with a few exceptions, not always, but I've had properties that have gone down in value. I've had problem properties, but with almost, apart from a few exceptions, I've always made money from property, and I've made money by using other people's money, by borrowing, by getting involved with joint ventures, or just taking mortgages. If you can buy a property for £100,000 with only £25,000, and the rest of it comes from a bank, and that the tenant pays that bank loan off, that's a pretty good deal. You couldn't do that with shares. You can't just say, well, I'm going to go and buy some shares in Glaxo because they've discovered the latest coronavirus drug, and say to the bank, well, I want to buy £100,000 worth of shares. Will you lend me 75,000? No, they won't. They wouldn't even lend you money to buy their own shares, let alone Glaxo. So property I think is unique. I can't think of any other investments where you could do that to that extent. Maybe gold, is if it's deposited in the bank, but gold doesn't produce an income. Property produces an income as well as growth. So as far as I'm concerned, property has been good to me. Many people argue that you can make more money in the stock market, you can make more money doing this or that, or trading in commodities. But, some of these things are quite complicated. Property has always worked out quite well for me. And it's tangible, isn't it? It's tangible. You can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can control it. People now at the moment have got a lot of their livelihoods tied up in pension schemes. And I was talking about this yesterday, that if your money is in a work-based pension scheme or a personal pension scheme or whatever, and it's invested in shares in the stock market, then you are at risk. Because if the stock market does fall again, like it did a couple of months ago, and like I think it will, you could lose a large proportion of your fund. So do talk to your financial advisor if you're not even sure where your money is actually invested. You give it to the pension company, you think, oh, I'm going to get this money back. But the growth in that fund can go up and down as well as up. It's not guaranteed. The only guaranteed type of pension schemes are called final salary pension schemes. And these tend to be with very few large companies. Most of them have phased them out because they're too expensive to run. Mostly now it's with government employees, NHS workers, council employees, local authorities, teachers, police, fire service, and of course MPs who get the best of all of the pensions. They get the highest, what they call an accrual rate. So they get the most bang for their buck. Even if they're only there 5 or 10 years, they get a pretty good pension. Maybe not as good as MEPs and Eurocrats, but don't get me started on that one. But they've got guaranteed pension schemes. The rest of us have to fund a scheme in what's called a money purchase scheme, where you're investing the money, it then grows in a fund, and then that fund will produce a fund at the end, and it will buy you an annuity, or buy you a pension annuity, depending on A, how much is in the fund at the end, and B, what the annuity rates are. And at the moment, the annuity rates they're down because interest rates are so low. So people retiring today are getting a lot less pension for their fund value than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. I remember when annuities were paying out 15%. If you had £100,000, you could get a pension of 15,000. Now you'd be lucky to get 3,000 or 4,000. I don't know I don't know what the exact annuity rates are at the moment, but it's very poor. So it's quite difficult to make enough money to retire, and that's why a lot of people have turned to property investment, where they see it as a safer bet, although it does carry risks, obviously, and it's not passive, but it's considered a safer bet, and they build up a portfolio which hopefully they can then either sell at retirement or just use the rental income to live on during retirement. Again, it's not passive. It's not passive like a pension scheme that just sends you that money out every month for doing nothing. Property investment and letting properties requires some work. It does require work. But then I was talking to someone the other day and they said, oh God, I've had another phone call from that tenant. She's driving me potty. I just want to sell this property. Would you buy it off me? I just want to get rid of this bloody property. It's driving me mad. And I said, well, what's the problem? He said, well, there's a leak in the radiator and British Gas wouldn't fix it under the gas cover. I said, well, okay, just call another plumber, or if you're fed up with the calls, get it managed. Give it to an agent and say, right, you manage it, you take all the phone calls and then phone me when there's a bill to pay. Or, you can sell it, but then if you sell it, what happens then? You put it in the bank, and what do you get from the bank? 0.01%, almost virtually nothing. So if you realise the capital from your property, your income is going to go down very fast. And then I said to the person, well, okay, the tenant might be driving you a bit mad, but how often do they call? Well, every couple of months maybe, when something goes wrong. I said, well, maybe your property's a bit tired. Maybe you haven't spent much money on it in the last 5 years. I said, well, no, I probably haven't. So things like the heating system, the electrics are going to go wrong now and again. Maybe a leak in radiator because it's very old. Well, yeah, that's probably true. And how long's the tenant been there? Well, about 5 years. Ever missed a payment? No. They always pay their rent. Even though there's a problem, they always pay their rent. So I said, really? And I think this person was getting something like £1,000 a month profit from the property. Maybe not complete profit, but roughly the residual between the mortgage payment and the rent was probably £900 to £1,000 a month. I said, well, most people have to go out to work for that sort of money, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week. How many hours are you actually putting in every week on that property? And the answer was not very many. Maybe less than an hour a week. And I said, when was the last time you actually visited the property? Well, a few years ago. So you can get het up with, because a tenant phones up and goes, oh, this is broken down or that's broken. It might be on a Friday night. But in the great scheme of things, is it really like work? No, it's not really like work, going to work, getting up in the morning, getting on a train or a bus or driving through traffic, parking, working all day from 8 till 6 and coming home tired and knackered and and then the weekends just chilling out because you're so exhausted. No, it's not like that at all. At best you might spend half an hour to an hour a week on a property, and that's if you're running a HMO with people coming and going all the time. The average single let is not going to take up much work at all. It's more fear that scares people. But it is, you do have to get it right. You have to make sure the property is set up correctly. You have to make sure that you've got good tenants in place. You've got good management if you have good managers in place, and you've got the right agreements. And you look after your tenant. You've got to nurture your tenant. You've got to love your tenants and look after them, make sure they're comfortable. You don't want to be like one of these rogue landlords, which I don't understand. Why be a rogue landlord and not repair things? Why be a rogue landlord and have damp in the property and poor electrics and dangerous things hanging out of the wall? No. Why do that? Because it's counterintuitive. It works against you if you're a poor landlord. You're better off to be a good landlord and have good tenants and get paid every month. And I think it's a great business. So if you're interested in getting into that, have a look at the webinar. I'll put a link up on Facebook in a moment. And all the best to you. Good luck with that. So thanks for listening. And as I said, great to see you all here on Facebook Live. Really appreciate your company and your comments. And I will be having a quiet evening here in London at 32 degrees. Maybe I'll have a glass of cold wine in the garden. And so whatever you're doing tonight, have a great evening. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now.